Hi, I'm Greg, and welcome to episode 5 in my Unity 3D tutorial series, How to Write Q Bert from Scratch. In this video, we fix a few minor bugs, and we add the side-crawling enemy Ugg to the game. So grab your favorite beverage, pull up a chair, and follow along as I teach you how to write Q Bert from scratch in Unity 3D. In our previous video, we got much of the gameplay working. We added transport disk and we added Coily the snake. When he gets to the bottom, he transforms into the snake and he chases after the player. But there is a bug. When Q Bert jumps on this transport disk, Coily should jump off the edge. Instead, he followed me all the way up to the top. He will jump off the edge if I get on this transport disk. So the problem is probably in the Coily code where he's following the player, where we get his jump location. So if we go into our prefabs enemies Coily and we open up the Coily script and we go down, there's a function in here. Let me minimize that and zoom in. Get random jump location. So right here, we basically check to see if Q Bert is above or below him, and then if we should jump up and left or up and right or down and left and down and right. In here, I thought I could just change the order of these so that I could check to see if he's above and to the left of me before I check if he's above and to the right, because what's happening is it's meeting this condition and he's following me up northeast. But actually, if I just swap these, then I would just switch the problem to the other side, and he would not jump off the edge on the other side. So I think what I need to do instead is I actually need to check to see if Q Bert is on a transport disk. And there's a couple of ways I can do that. I could grab the transport disk off of Q Bert, because when Q Bert jumps on a transport disk, and they activate the transport disk, Q Bert is basically made a child of the disk. So that's one way we could do it, but I think it would be cleaner if we actually got the transport disk from the board manager. So the board manager is what instantiates the transport disks, and it maintains a reference to the transport disk in a collection called transport disks. So all we really need to do is add a property to the board manager that will expose the current active transport disk. So we already have this property here that gives us how many unflipped platforms we have. So what we could do is we could say public transport disk, active transport disk, and we could use a link query to return the first or default disk that's active. So basically, transport disks first or default, and our condition will be is active. So this will search our collection of transport disks and return the first one for which is active is true, and it'll be null if there aren't any. So then what we could do is in our board, actually in the Coily script, before we check this snake always jumps toward player, we could say is Q Bert on a transport disk? And the condition for that will be, we'll get a local variable here, transport disk, and we'll use the game manager .instance .board manager .active transport disk. So we'll just save that off in a local variable. And if we have a transport disk, which means we found one that's active, then we're going to have to calculate our jump position based on whether it's the left disk or the right disk. So I think we actually need to add something to the transport disk to say whether or not the left disk is active or the right disk is active. So let's go into the transport disk script. In the activate disk function, we're assigning either destination right or destination left to this destination variable. We can use that to determine if we're the left disk or the right disk. So we've got a public bool is active. Let's add another public bool. We'll just call it left disk. And this will be true if destination equals destination left. And if it's not left disk, then obviously it would be right disk. So let's go back into our Coily script, and we will say, well, we know if he's on the transport disk that we're going to want to jump up. So let's first of all set our position.y to be plus equal 3. But then we need to determine if he should jump left or right. So we'll do that by saying if transport disk dot left disk, then position.x will be 3 less than our current position, and our facing will become northwest. Else our position.z, position.z will be incremented by 3, and our facing will be northeast. Now we want to put all of this in an else statement here. So we don't have a transport disk. We're going to have them chase the player, wherever the player may be. So let's go down to the bottom of this case statement and put that inside a brace. It's interesting that Rider tells me that we could never reach this code. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. It doesn't matter if it's there, even if we can't reach it. So this should handle if Q Bert's on a transport disk and jump to follow him either up to the right or to the left. So we'll test this by going back into Unity, let Unity recompile, hit play. Let's wait for Coily to turn into a snake and start to chase us. Jump on the disc. He should follow us, and he does. Now let's see if he follows us down the other side. Looked like a little bit of a glitch there. All right, so he followed me down. Oops. And he killed me. But he followed me off the edge on both sides. Let's see if he just chases me. All right, so it looks like we have fixed that bug. The next thing I want to do is add some more enemies. The easiest enemy to add would be Bad Ball. Bad Ball is basically just a red ball that hops down the pyramid and will damage Q Bert on contact, and then he just falls off the edge on the bottom. But I think it would be more interesting to add Ugg or Wrong Way. So Ugg and Wrong Way crawl along the sides of the pyramid and hop around randomly. They also will damage Q Bert on contact. And I just think they would be a little bit more interesting visually to add first. Now I don't have a model for Ugg, but what we do have is, if you remember for Coily, we downloaded this everything library, all these animals, and I know that there is a tarantula in here somewhere that we could use that I think would be a cool side-crawling enemy. I think that is a Black Widow, and I think I like the shape of the tarantula better. And there we go. So I'm just going to hit Control D to duplicate that, and I'm going to rename that Ugg. And I'm going to create a new folder here under Project. I'm going to call this Enemies. And I'm going to drag Coily, the Coily folder, into that. And then under Enemies, I'm going to create a folder and call it Ugg. And I'm going to drag that Ugg mesh into the Ugg folder. Okay, and I'm going to drag this up a level since it's not really specific to Coily. Okay, so now we have an Ugg mesh. Let's come up to here. Actually, before I get too far into this, one thing I'd like to do is have a representation of the pyramid to use for where I place and arrange Ugg. And the easiest way to do that would be to hit play and let it build the pyramid. Then I will hit pause, and I'm going to create a new empty game object, and I'm going to call it pyramid. And then we're going to expand this don't destroy on load, managers, game manager. I'm going to select all these squares, and I'm going to drag them onto that pyramid object. So now there is our whole pyramid, so I can turn that on and off. And I'm going to create a prefab from that. So I'm just going to drag that into the prefabs folder and stop playing. So now if I was to drag that into the scene, we would have a representation of our game board. So now we can create a new empty game object called Ugg. And I want to spawn Ugg either here, 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 or here. And this would be position 300, I believe. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this object at 300. And if we double click him and look at the scene view, yeah, you can see that puts him right there. Now we're also going to need to have a floor that Ugg can stand on, because right now he would just fall if we were to spawn him here. He's not actually going to be clinging to the walls, but we're going to make it look like he's clinging to the walls. And so he needs to actually sit on something. So we'll create a plane, which we will call floor. So right click here, 3D object, plane, and I will rename that to be floor. And we're going to want to put him on a layer called floor. So let's add some layers. In fact, we're going to add a couple of different layers. We're going to want a floor layer, but we're also going to want a sidewalker layer, and Ugg is going to be a sidewalker. And while I'm in here, I'm going to add a transport disk layer. Okay, so if I come out here to floor, I will select floor layer, and then Ugg we can leave it default. Actually, we want to put him on the sidewalker layer. And I'm just going to pick this transport disk and put him on the transport disk layer. And let's look at these other ones. Q Bert is on the player level layer. That's good. Pyramid should be platform. No, we don't want to change pyramid. That's our temporary debugging thing. Square should be platform, and it is. Okay. I think we're probably good for that for now. So let's get our floor set up. We're going to want to rotate this, I think negative 45 degrees, and then we're going to want to resize it. That should just about do it. That should be good enough for Ugg to stand on it. Let's look at this now. We don't need a mesh renderer. Well, I'll leave that there for now. Let me get rid of this mesh collider and add a box collider. And then we'll get rid of the mesh renderer. That should be good. So you won't see the floor, but Ugg will be able to stand on it. So going back to Ugg, let's pick this mesh, drag it onto here, and then we'll drag this as a child of Ugg. So now Ugg should have that spider mesh. Now for a material, there's a basic material that came with that enemies file. I think that would look good. Set that to be 000. All right, so now we're beginning to see Ugg on here. He's not positioned the way I want him to be initially. For one thing, I want him to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to scale him up to 1.75 his initial, 1.75. And I want to rotate him So he's hugging the wall. And now you can see that he's not, even though he's at the right position here for that square, he's not displayed correctly as if he's hugging the wall. So we're going to want to play with the mesh a little bit. For one thing, I'm going to make him come up a little bit higher and maybe a little bit farther forward. Something like that. Looks like he's peeking over the edge of the cube, though. No, he's not. It looks like it from one angle, but not the other. Yeah, okay, I think that looks pretty good. Like he's really hugging the side of the cube. Let's give Ugg a box collider. And we want to give the parent object a rigid body. And I'm going to freeze his rotation because we're going to manually control his rotation. I think that should be good. He should now detect collisions. And we need to go into our physics settings. So into our project settings, physics. So transport disks should only collide with the player. Sidewalkers should collide with platforms and the player and the floor. The floor isn't going to collide with anything except the sidewalkers. We want Coily, which is on the default layer, to collide with the platform, and we want the player to collide with the platform. I think all this is probably good. Let me see what happens if I hit play. Okay, so he fell through the floor. Why would he fall through the floor? Okay, future Greg here. I realized I didn't record the little segment where I fixed the issue with Ugg falling through the floor. So I'm just inserting that segment here. The problem was on Ugg, the child element, which has the mesh, was not on the sidewalker layer. It was still on the default layer. And that's why Ugg was falling through the floor. All I had to do was set it and all its children to the sidewalker layer, and that problem went away. So now let's add an animator to Ugg. Animator. And in here, under the Assets, Enemies, Ugg, we're going to right-click, Create Animator Controller, and we're going to call this Ugg Animator Controller. And then we're going to select Ugg, and we're going to drag that controller into the animator component here. And we're going to come down into our animation tab, and we're going to create a new animation, and we're going to call this Ugg Idle. And we're going to add a property. We're going to expand the Ugg child transform and grab the scale. And initially that's at 175, which is his initial scale here. And so that created a keyframe for us right there with his initial scale. So we're going to go out to about 30 frames, and we're going to hit record here, and I'm going to change the scale X to be about 1.8. I'm going to double the scale Y and scale Z about 1.8. So it's basically making him get a little bit bigger. So you can see him kind of pulsing a little bit, and then he should go back to his initial at the end of this animation. So we hit play, we've got a nice little idle animation. Nice. So we double click on the animator controller. You can see it's already dragged in this idle animation. And so that's going to be our initial entry point. So if we hit play, Ugg should be sitting there idling. And he is. Nice. Let's go back into our animation down here. Pick Ugg. And we want to create a new clip. So create new clip. And we'll call this Ugg Jump. And same thing, we're going to add the scale off of the child transform. expand this. So it's starting off at 1.75. We don't want this to be as long an animation, so I'm just going to grab this node here and drag it down to about there. And then we're only going to go out about 1 frame. I'll hit record. And let's stretch him a little bit. So we'll go 2. We'll make him a little bit thinner here. And then much longer here. So he's going from his normal size, stretching about like that. Maybe I'll go a little more extreme. Oh, I did them in the wrong place, didn't I? No, I didn't. Okay. I want to copy these values over to here. So what were they again? Let me just copy these. Control C, Control V. So I want him to stay in that pose the whole time he's jumping. And so we'll add a transition up here from idle to jump. I'll just put it down here. So we'll say make transition to jump. We're going to add a parameter here, and it's going to be a bool, and the parameter will be jumping. And we don't want that to have an exit time. We don't want it to have a fixed duration. We want it to immediately switch to that pose when he's jumping. And then when that's over, we're going to go back to idle. And I want him to stay in that pose for a minute. And then we'll transition back immediately after that minute. Because a minute is how long the jump sequence takes to jump from one cube to another. And I'm going to change this to play normal, focused. Hit play. And you'll see he's idling here. And he should, when I click jumping, oh, you know, I forgot to add the condition. So if we click this transition, we didn't add the jumping equal true transition. All right, let's try that again. Hit play. And he jumps. Oh, but he's looping. We don't want that to loop. So we'll come in here to our animation, to the jump animation. Let's just double click that. And up here where it says loop time, let's turn that off. And let me take a look at idle. We want that to loop and loop the pose. All right, let's try this one more time. Hit play. So he's idling. I'm going to click jumping. And he jumped. Cool. And then after a second, he should switch back to land. But it did not. Because that Boolean is still true. Okay. We can tweak that some more later, but I think that's good enough for now, just to give us a little interesting motion when he's moving. So let's create a prefab under enemies for Ugg. And I'm going to go ahead and delete Ugg from here. We're going to want to create a script for Ugg, but I think before we do that, we want Ugg to derive from an EnemyBase class, and currently we only have one enemy script, and that is Coily. And there are some things that will be shared between Coily and Ugg that can go into a base class. So I think what I want to do is I want to create a script, and I want to call it EnemyBase. And I want to open that up in the editor. And we're going to go into the Coily script. And I think I'm just going to copy pretty much everything inside these braces here and paste it into that EnemyBase script. And then I'm just going to remove the things that aren't specific to Coily. And I'll probably do some refactoring while I'm in there as well. Okay, so let's look at this. We're going to want the animator. We're not going to want egg and snake because that's definitely specific to Coily. We do want jump delay. I'm going to change this to 1. All right, so jump delay, jumping, dead, that's all good. Transforms, good. Jumping, landed, that's good. Legal jump locations, we have to import our namespace. I'm going to rename this. This is a event that says Coily died. I'm going to rename this to Enemy died. All right. And let's see. One thing I definitely need to do is these things that are private that need to be shared by the derived class have to be made protected. So change that to protected, change that to protected. Yeah, I think all of these need to be protected. Okay. And let's see. Can jump. I think I'm going to change this a little bit here. I'm going to say if jumping or dead, I'm just going to return false. Yeah, I want to do that. And I'm going to make this protected. This needs to be protected. So we're going to cache our transform. We're going to instantiate the enemy died event. We're going to populate or instantiate our list of legal jump locations. Okay, I think that's good. I believe that on enable needs to be protected because the base class will override this. And obviously this will be specific to the Coily class. Don't need that here. Let's go ahead and make on disable protected as well. And let's look at update. So we've already moved that logic into if can jump. So I think that's probably good for that. All right. What else do we have? We have on game state change. I want to make this a virtual function. So I'm going to say protected virtual void on game state changed. I think all of this is probably okay. Jump, I'm going to make protected virtual. So we set jumping to true. We set our animator to jumping. We get our jump location. This will be made a virtual function, which we can override depending on the type of monster we are. All this should be fine, I do believe. Yeah, I think all this looks good. Location off edge, that's going to be different depending on which monster it is. So I'll make this a virtual function as well. The reason I'm going to handle this differently is Ugg, since he's clinging to the walls, if we let him go all the way to position 20 on Z, he'll be up on the top cube that doesn't have a wall, and that would look really strange. So we're going to have to change this based on whether he's a sidewalker or not. Let's see. We're going to probably make pretty much all these things protected virtuals. The stuff that is specific to Coily will have to be removed from here. We don't care about Q Bert being on a transport disk. He's not going to chase the player. Let's see. So we get his position, we get his facing, he's doing the rotation. Yeah, this is going to have to be overridden. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to implement this for each class. This code may never even get run, maybe. I don't know. I'll have to revisit that when I actually get into the individual implementations. We want the collision enter to be virtual void. Protected virtual void. This all looks good. This all looks good. But we're not going to do any of this because we're not Coily. That's probably good for the base class. We're going to have to go into Coily now and make sure that he derives from this and that we didn't break anything. So let's go into Coily. Go up to the top of the script here. We can fix all these after we've determined everything we need. We will change this from mono behavior to EnemyBase. We'll be getting the animator from the base class. We'll be getting the jump delay from the base class. So we will just add this serialized field here. I don't think I need any of these variables now. We're going to change Coily died to be, well, let's deal with these one at a time. So can jump is in the base class. We don't need that. I don't think we need to do anything in awake. Everything should be done in the base class. We're going to override on enable. So we'll say protected override void on enable. Let me go to the base class. Did I not make that virtual? All right, so what are we going to do in the override? So in on enable, we'll call the base class, and we're just going to do the egg specific stuff. Okay. I don't think we need to do anything in on disable, so I'll just leave that gone. I don't know that we even need to override on update, so we'll get rid of that. I don't think I need to override the game state changed. And I don't think I need to override jump. Location off edge. Do I need to override that? Coily does not need to. Ugg will need to, but Coily does not. Coily can use the base class values. Same thing with, actually, let me look at this. Get random jump location. Coily needs to override this because he has the snake specific stuff. So we'll make this a protected override. So he will override that and do his own Coily specific logic in there. And I think we need to do the same thing here. So an on collision enter, we'll first call the base class. And let's see, what are we doing in here? We're basically checking to see if we should kill the egg or not. I just want to add one more condition to this. So I'm adding this because what we're doing here is we're checking to see if we should turn Coily into the snake when he reaches the bottom cube. But there could be a race condition where he gets to the bottom cube and hits Q Bert at the same time, in which case he would be dead, and we don't want to execute this logic in that case. So this is just a preemptive bug fix here. Okay, so I think Q Bert should now work correctly derived from the EnemyBase class. Let's go back into Unity and give that a test. Oh, there's some compiler errors. Well, it looks like we broke some stuff in the EnemyManager when we made those changes. Probably we renamed this event. So we want this to be enemy died. Is that all the errors? I think so. Go back into Unity. See if those errors go away. Hit play. I want to run that maximized. All right. It looks like Coily continues to work correctly, even derived from the EnemyBase class. So now we need to start scripting Ugg. So let's create a C# script. Call it Ugg. Go to our prefab enemy Ugg. And I'm going to double click that. And we'll go back to our script enemies and drag Ugg onto there. And we'll double click that to open them up in the editor. Zoom in, get rid of the boilerplate. And change this to derive from EnemyBase. All right. And I know we're going to want to add some spawn positions for where Ugg can be spawned at. So we'll say serialized field, vector 3, and an array of those, and we'll call those spawn positions. And in on enable, which will be an override, before we call the base class, we are going to set our position to be one of those spawn positions. So we will say transform, which we're getting from the base class, dot position. We're going to take a random spawn position. Random dot range 0 to spawn positions dot length. And that should place Ugg at a random position within those spawn positions. So let's go back out to Unity and set that up. And so if we go back to our scene, we've got this pyramid here. And we know that 300 is going to place an Ugg right here. So let's grab one of the Uggs, place them on here. So 300, that's one spawn position. We want to also be able to spawn him here, 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 or here. I think maybe we want to be able to spawn him here. So what would that be? -3, -3, 0, negative. No. 0. Oh, so 0, 0, -3 will be a spawn position. So every one of these is 3x and 3z greater than the previous one. So that's 0, 0, -3. So then the next one would be 300. The next one would be 603, 906, and so forth. So now we know our spawn positions. We're going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those. So we'll go down here and we will click the plus sign 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we want it -300. No. What was it? -30. What was that? No, I want it 0, 0, 0, -3. 0, 0, -3. Then we want it 300, 603, 906, 1209, 15012, 18015. Those should be all the spawn positions. Okay, we're going to have to do some work on the enemy manager to get the enemy manager spawning Uggs. And while I'm in here, I want to edit this Ugg prefab. I want that box collider to stick out a little bit because the player is going to land a little bit behind Ugg. So I want to have lots of collision room there for the player to hit Ugg. If Ugg is ever on the same platform as Q Bert needs to die. So I just want to give a little bit more collision room there for that. So we go down to our enemy manager. We're going to need to have some enemy prefabs that we can spawn. There's a coily prefab, but we want also just plain old enemy prefabs. So let's have a serialized field, game object array, and we will call these enemy prefabs. Okay. Should spawn enemy. I want to add an additional check here. We don't want to spawn, see down here where we say if should spawn coily, we're checking to see if we're playing. We can just move that up into should spawn enemy because we don't call this until after we return from this. And we can just put that up in that first call. So the way we're currently doing it, if we shouldn't spawn an enemy, return. Otherwise, we call spawn enemy. Spawn enemy says if we should spawn coily, spawn coily. We're going to put an else here, or we're going to return, and then we're going to instead spawn just a regular monster. But since we're checking in here if we should spawn Coily, we want to check for that game instance is playing in the should spawn enemy check here. Awake is good. Enable is good. On disable is good. We don't need to change. Update. This all looks good. Now this is already looking to destroy any enemies in our collection, so that's already good. So it looks like spawn enemy is where we want to get most of the work. So we're already saying if should spawn Coily. So let's just put this, I'm going to move this delay up to here so that I can just put a return statement here. And then down here, we'll say our prefab. I want to say get random enemy prefab. We currently only have one, but we plan on adding more monsters. So let's just come down here and say game object get random enemy prefab. And we're just going to return a random element from that prefab array. Okay. So we are getting a random prefab. We're going to instantiate that prefab and parent it to us. So he's going to be a child of the enemy manager. We want to add a listener to the enemy died event. So we'll say enemy get component EnemyBase, and then enemy died add listener on enemy died. So this is going to be different from on Q Bert died. And what are we going to want to do in there? So we're going to remove it from our enemies collection. You know, I think I want to make that event take the enemy that died. So we need to modify that. Let's go into our EnemyBase. And where is that event? Right here. Let's make that game object. And then let's find where we... right here. All right. So wherever the enemy dies, we're going to invoke that and we're going to pass in our game object. So we go back into the enemy manager. We don't really care about it here, but we are going to care about it here. So what are we going to do in here? We're going to remove it from our list of enemies. We're going to remove the listener. And we didn't have to do this with Coily because there's only ever one Coily. Although we probably, well, we do remove that here. Okay. And let's see, we also want to destroy that object. We want to give time for him to, if he's falling off the edge, for his animation to complete. So we'll say destroy enemy after 3 seconds. Okay, that should handle spawning and destroying enemies. So if we go back into Unity, if I go down to Resources, Managers, Game Manager, Enemy Manager, we've got these enemy prefabs. We want to grab Ugg and drag him into there. Now, we haven't implemented all the logic for Ugg, but theoretically, we should start seeing Ugg spawn. And there is one. He's not jumping, but they're spawning. Okay, so we've got the manager spawning Uggs. We have some errors here we're going to have to deal with. Oh, we haven't assigned our animator. Yeah, so if we go and look at our Ugg prefab on the script here, we need to drag our animator down into there. And that's so we can programmatically set our jump animation whenever Ugg jumps, and then set it back when he lands. So let's finish writing some of the Ugg specific script stuff. Our get random jump location is going to be a little bit different. So we're going to override get random jump location. We're not going to call the base class. Let's see, we're going to take our position and save it off. We're going to take our facing and save it off. And let me just satisfy the compiler and return a position. All right, so we want to get legal locations. So currently we get the legal jump locations from the board manager, and we're going to want to modify that logic if we're a side walker. So let me just set this to be int legal locations game manager instance board manager legal jump locations. We're going to pass in our legal jump locations array, which we get from the base class. We're going to pass in our current position. We're going to pass in false for the down only parameter. And we're going to end up adding a new parameter for if we are a side walker. So let's go into this function here. This is the legal jump locations function in the base class, or in the board manager. So what we're going to do, I'm going to rename this parameter. It says down. I want to rename that to down only. So this is for when Coily is in egg form and he's only hopping down. So we're going to add another Boolean here, and we're going to call that side walker. And we'll default it to false. So just like we did with the down only variable, if we don't specify this variable, it will be as if we passed in false. So the existing calls that are coming from Coily don't have to change. They'll continue to work, and they'll just be as if they passed in false here. So what do we want to do in here if we are a side walker? Well, first of all, in here, I want to change this to say if I'm a side walker or I'm not jumping out of bounds. So I want to be able to get out of bounds positions if I'm a side walker, because a side walker can jump out of bounds just normally. If you played the original Q Bert, Ugg and Wrong Way, they'll just hop off the edge sometimes. So we want that to be able to happen. This logic here would not allow us to jump out of bounds. So like when Coily, if you're not on a transport disk, Coily's never going to jump out of bounds. He's always going to stay on the pyramid. But we want to allow Ugg to jump out of bounds. So I'm adding this statement here. So that will include out of bounds positions. We need to add some side positions. So currently we have up directions and we have down directions. We need to add some side directions. So we'll add another variable here, side directions, and then we'll instantiate them and initialize them here. There we go. Now we know from when we did our spawn locations that the positions to the left and the right are exactly 3 different on both the x and the z-axis. So we'll add a new vector 3, -3, 0, -3 to go left, and 3, 0, 3 to go right. So that should handle that. So down here, we'll say if we're a sidewalker, then we want to add to our legal jump locations all the side directions. We're doing a little link query here. We're going to add to the vector for each one. We're going to say position plus the vector from that array. Okay, I don't know what that message was about, but it likes it now. So this is a link query. We're basically iterating through all of the elements of the side directions array, and for each one, we're adding that to our position, and then we're adding it to our legal jump locations. So the long way to write this would be to do a for each loop, and then just take position plus vector and then add it to the legal jump locations. All right, so that should give us legal jump locations to jump sideways as well as up, and we're never jumping down if we are Ugg. At least I don't think he did in the original game, but we're not going to do it in our game. So now we have our legal jump locations. We need to add this Boolean true for a sidewalker. Okay, so we get our legal jump locations. We need to pick a random one and assign that to it, a position that we're going to jump to. So we're going to say the position is going to equal legal jump locations random.range legal locations. I think I want to make this plural. We need to do something with our facing. What did the original base class do with the facing? He did a rotate. Oh, of course, I've changed all this. Let me go look at Coily. Ah, okay. We're setting the facing based on which position he's jumping to. We didn't change his facing when he was jumping down. We only did it if he was jumping off the board or chasing the player. So we're going to have to figure out what our new facing would be based on which direction we're jumping. But I'm going to leave that for now. I just want to see if we can get him jumping correctly. So we're going to need to override the jump function. And we're not going to call the base class. We're going to do our own implementation in here. The first thing we're going to do is set jumping to be true. We're going to start the jump animation. Okay. We're going to get our random jump location. And we're going to check to see if we're jumping out of bounds. And we're going to have to modify that function to take, guess what, a sidewalker Boolean. Let's see, we're going to make that an if statement. So let's add that parameter. Let me go into that function. So where's the board manager? Board manager. Landing out of bounds. We're going to make this optional. We're going to call this sidewalker and default it to false. So now all those other places should be fine. So all we're going to do is we're going to say if we're a sidewalker, we're going to modify this return statement slightly. Basically, if z is greater than 17 or less than negative 2.5, if the x is less than negative 2.5 or greater than 18 should be fine. And if y is less than, yeah. Is that right? Yeah, I think that should be fine. All right. So if we're landing out of bounds, then we're dead. Our location is going to be location off edge. And that should not need to change because we're going to actually implement that in here. Oh, it has a parameter. Oh, we've got to pass in location. Duh, it needs a location to know if we're jumping off the edge. And we're going to do the jump. So transform.do jump location jump power 25, one jump over a duration of 1 second. Set ease linear. Actually, for this one, I think we want to use the in sign easing method. And then we want to set auto kill to be true. And we're going to invoke the enemy died, passing in our game object, and return. That's if we jump off the edge. Otherwise, we're going to do a do jump. Location, a jump power of 4, one jump over half a second. Actually, I want him to jump slower than Coily. So we'll say 1 second. Set ease. This case, I definitely want it to be linear. Okay, let's handle our special location off edge logic. So we're going to go to the enemy base. I'm just going to copy that. And see what I need to tweak. Okay, so the off-edge location is going to be -10. That's good. We want to change the values here because we can jump from farther in on the pyramid because we don't go all the way to the right edge because you can cling to the walls. And let's see, that looks good. I don't think I need to change anything else. That was a pretty simple change. All right, that may be all the custom logic we need for Ugg. Let's jump back into Unity. And I think we do need to tweak Ugg's animations a little bit. So let me go back into the prefab for Ugg. And look at his animator. Yeah, we need to add a landing animation. So we're going to come in here and we're going to say create new clip and call it Ugg land. All right. And so actually we're going to take this transition here and I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to create a transition from here to here. And I'm just going to set that to have an exit time of 1. And I don't think it needs a condition. So once this is set to false, this will transition over to land after 1 second. I think that's how that will work. And then this can just go straight to idle. I'm just going to set those to 0. And again, no condition. So now what do we want to do in the landing animation? For one thing, I want to copy the ending of our jump animation. And that will be our start. I want to go out about 5 frames. And let me just set this to like 1.8 on all values. And then go out to about 10 frames and set it to its default scale. And so the idea being that when he lands, he'll kind of squish a little bit. So he's going to start out stretched. He'll squish a little bit and then go to his normal scale. Anyway, we'll see how that looks. All right. So let's just give this a test and see how things look at this point. We jumped off the edge. Huh, he's always jumping off the edge, so that's not good. Oh. I'm not convinced that that's correct. That was odd. Oh, I don't have the floor on that side. It's close. Let me look at that plane that we set up for the floor, because it needs to extend out to the left a little bit. Hopefully that will work. Let me give that a test. I can probably pull that other edge in some. I am going to disable Coily's script so he's not jumping around killing me. We probably want to make it so his first jump won't be off the edge. It also seems like his jump delay is not working correct. Oh, it's set to, well, his is 0.5. His is set to 1, but sometimes it seems like he jumped sooner than that. Maybe I'll set it to 2 so he didn't jump as often, but I probably should put some logic in there so that he has to do a few jumps before he can jump off the edge. I'll have to think about that. I do want to tweak this floor a little bit more. That should be better. So now he should be able to sit anywhere in these spawn positions, but he won't catch it if he's jumping over that edge at all. Give it another quick test. I'll re-enable Coily and I'll play it a little bit and see how it feels. Oh, one other thing I want to do. I want to disable this debug pyramid. I'm wondering if that was causing any issues, having a duplicate pyramid on there. Okay, there's a bug here. When Coily jumps off the edge, it's supposed to kill all the other enemies. And it did not. So we're going to want to fix that. So that would be in our board enemy manager, I believe. That should happen in on Coily die. Let's see. Yeah, so in on Coily died, I'm pretty sure we're going to want to destroy all the enemies. So instead of doing this, let me look at this for a second. Yeah, so instead of doing this, I am just going to say destroy all enemies. And then in destroy Coily, I'll put the delay here. I also want to set our spawn delay. And I want to see if I can figure out why sometimes it seemed like Ugg was jumping sooner than he should have. It doesn't look like we're setting his jump delay in here. I wonder, does that happen in the EnemyBase class? There's nothing in there that would set it. What does Coily do? Interesting. All of Coily's jump logic is handled by the base class. Oops. So that gets reset when he lands. I probably should also set it when he jumps. Let me just give that another play. I couldn't tell if it destroyed all the other enemies. Does not look like it did. Go back to that EnemyManager. So on Coily died, which should be getting called by Coily. So I have Q Bert's on a transport disk. EnemyBase jump. If landing out of bounds, he's going to call enemy died. And in the case of Coily, that should go to on Coily died. So when he gets that, I should call destroy all enemies. But it does take up to 3 seconds. Maybe I'll make that 2 seconds. I'm still not sure that's going to make the difference. And just for the sake of sanity here, I'm going to log out. And give that another quick play. I hit Coily. Okay, so Coily died. Ugg died. Well, I think that's probably good enough for this video. We'll have some things to tweak in the next video. And I'm trying to keep these videos from getting too terribly long. I've been going pretty long lately. Well, if you found this useful, and I hope you did, do me a favor and click that like and subscribe button. It really does help me to grow my channel. And as always, if you have any questions about anything I covered in this video, or any suggestions about things you'd like to see, drop a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Well, thanks so much for watching, and good luck on your game development journey.